From New Hampshire Public Radio and the Howe Library in Hanover, New Hampshire, you're listening to Check This Out, a literary series where we dive deeply into the works of emerging and diverse authors you may not have discovered yet. I'm your host, Rachel Barenbaum, author of the novel Atomic Anna. I'm thrilled to be able to bring these conversations to you over the next few weeks. Later in the series, we'll be hearing from Andrew Borriaga about his debut, Victim. But today on the show, my guest is Zibby Owens, and we are going to talk about her debut novel, Blank. She has an outsized presence in the publishing world with readers, writers, and book lovers. She's been called one of New York City's most powerful bookfluencers. Yes, that's actually a word. And she's doing more than anyone out there for authors and for books. And she just published her debut novel, Blank. Blank is a novel about a fortyish former literary sensation who fears she will be a one-hit wonder because when the book opens, she can't write a thing. With a deadline looming, she has 5 days to come up with a new book or to repay in advance she's already spent. Desperate, her 12-year-old helps her come up with an idea. What about a blank book? Is that bold or terrible? The book takes us into the posh world of Beverly Hills and Malibu mega mansions, middle age, a dying marriage, and the intricacies of publishing. It's about what's broken in publishing and how we can fix it, which is also what Zibby is about. I loved reading this book for the fast-moving plot and also for Zibby's take on the book world. I met Zibby back in 2019 when my first novel, A Bend in the Stars, was publishing. And my very first thought when I met this woman was, she loves books as much as anyone possibly can. She's in it for the books. Back then, she was running a podcast called Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Since then, she's founded a publishing company called Zibby Books, opened a bookstore, Zibby's Bookshop, and kept the podcast going, among many, many other things. People have called all of this the Zibby-verse. And we're going to talk all about that and her debut, Blank. Zibby Owens, welcome to Check This Out.
Thank you, Rachel. This is so fun. Appreciate it.
So you are doing more for books than anyone out there right now and really upending the publishing world. You've devoted your life to books and authors. And I have to start by asking you, why are books so important to you?
I've just loved books from the time I learned how to read. I think it was when I read Charlotte's Web for the very first time and realized they could make you cry. Like I was sobbing in my little bathroom in my Snoopy nightgown. And I just felt so moved and so deeply personally affected. And I loved that. I am so curious about people. I could read books nonstop. I could talk to people and learn about them nonstop. I just find stories and the human experience fascinating.
But you made the transition from book lover to author. So how did that happen?
Well, as soon as I realized I love reading, I thought, well, maybe I could do this myself. And I loved writing in school. My grandparents published a little miniature book of mine when I was 9 with 2 short stories, including How the Donut Got Its Hole. And I had my name on the spine. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to be an author. But it has taken from I guess when the book came out, so to speak, when I was 10, the 20 copies, till 47 when my debut novel came out to make that dream come true.
But in between, right, back in 2018, 2019, you started your podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. So that was really your entree into the industry. Can you talk about how you started that? Sort of why did you think I'm just going to do this?
Sure. So I had a failed entree into the industry in 2003 when I took a year off after business school and decided to write a novel. I had many other jobs at the same time, but I was determined to fulfill my dream. It was right after 9/11. I had lost my very best friend. I realized how short life really was. And I thought, okay, my dream in life is to write a novel. I'm just going to do it now. And unlike everyone else at business school, I'm not going to get the big marketing job or consulting gig or whatever. And I'm just going to do it. So I did. I spent a year. I told everyone in the world that I knew that this is what I was doing. I finished. I rewrote it 4 times from scratch. I got an agent and then it didn't sell. And it was so devastating. I was humiliated. I was gutted. I was like, maybe I'm not a good writer. I don't understand. And it was a very lightly fictionalized version of my own life. So I don't even know if I can call it fiction. I mean, it was kind of fiction. Anyway, off balance, did not sell. And I ended up ghostwriting a book thanks to that same agent. So I saw a little bit about what publishing was like, but then I ended up having my twins and I took 11 years off to stay home with my kids. So my entree officially was delayed. I was too depressed to write fiction again for another decade. I've always written nonfiction and personal essays. My first personal essay came out in 17 magazine that I wrote when I was 14. And that is really easy for me. I love doing that. I write essays all the time for lots of different outlets. And I've written a memoir, and that is much easier. But when I went to write a novel, I met with people in about 2017 and heard that I had no platform and nobody was interested in my essays as a book. And before I did any novel writing at all, I would have to build myself up. And so another girlfriend at the time said, "Why don't you start a podcast?" And I thought, why a podcast? I don't even listen to podcasts. I don't know anything about them. But I had thought about collecting essays into a book and calling that book Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. So then I took that title and said, fine, I'll do a podcast. I'll call it Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And who knows, maybe it'll help me build my platform. And that's how it started.
So I love that you're so open about that failure and, that devastating rejection, because I think it's easy to look at your Zibbyverse that you have now and just see it as this polished, shiny success story. But in fact, there's a huge backstory of, devastating rejection. And that is a writer's life.
It didn't end there, by the way. I mean, I did end up writing another novel called 40 Love. I wrote it again, all these different ways, all these different times. I tried it as this literary prose poem. I have tried all sorts of different things and have written so many book proposals that I feel like I should start a book proposal business, although they didn't sell, so maybe I'm not good at writing book proposals. But anyway, there was a lot of rejection along the way, and I as I was getting rejected, I kept interviewing more authors, and so sometimes I would, like, get off the phone with my agent, and he'd be like, "No, it's not looking like this is gonna work. It's, sorry." And I'd have to, like, wipe my tears away and then press record and start interviewing, which is fine because there's nothing that gets me out of my own head and nothing I enjoy more than talking to authors, but I was just like, "Okay, well, it's just not gonna happen for me." Like, I'm listening to all these stories of rejection, and that's lovely, but those people actually overcame the rejection and got their books out, but I'm actually not going to get my book out, and that feels terrible. So, I kept licking my wounds and then eventually picking myself up and like, "Okay, well, that didn't work, let's try this." And I just kept writing more and more and not wanting to give up. I just felt this compulsion, like, this is what I'm meant to do. I have to do this. And, but no, was it easy? Are you kidding? Absolutely not. Yeah, not at all.
So now we can look out on the Zibbyverse and you have a bookstore, a publishing company, the podcast, you have all these pieces. And you've been really open about having your dad as a role model who also built a business and you grew up watching him build his business. Can you talk about that role model and how that's inspired you?
I actually come from a line of entrepreneurs who came from nothing and built themselves up through creative ideas and relentless hard work. My going back a generation for 2 seconds, my grandfather on my mom's side came over from Hungary and had was completely just dirt poor and lived in Hartford, Connecticut, and worked himself to the bone and got a scholarship to Oberlin, a full ride, and worked in the library after all his jobs. He worked all these campus jobs just to be able to stay there and afford food and all of that. And he struck up a relationship with the janitor in the library to keep the library lights on late at night so he could get his work done. And he ended up going on to business school, getting a whole career in manufacturing, and started this trailer parts window company that ended up going public and was in a position to donate a gym to Oberlin. And when he went back, he thanked the janitor for keeping the lights on. So I love that story because it's all about libraries and books and the power of learning. And I think about authors and I think about the janitor and how I'm now in a position to help authors because of that one kind man who helped my grandfather get where he was in life. My grandfather on my other side started a linen store, like a dry goods store in Philadelphia. And my dad, with his entrepreneurial, always wanting to expand bent, was like, "Dad, you've got to turn this into a Bed Bath and Beyond type of thing," although it didn't really exist then. And his dad was like, "No, no, I'm perfectly happy having the one store." And that inspired my dad to then start his business, which is called Blackstone. And he started as a regular banker, like many people after going to business school at Lehman Brothers before it failed. And I was there when I was 9. Actually, when I was writing my book, he was starting his business, which became now, the largest asset manager around. And I've watched over the years as he pounded the pavement and got rejected everywhere, and nobody would give him money. And he was caught in rainstorms and just feeling like this would never work. And I watched him not give up and, dry himself off and try again. And I've also watched as he's built his business and gone into different areas. He has a skill that I don't know that I have. I keep going into areas that are like failing, but he keeps going into areas that are growing and making a mark there, and always being just super entrepreneurial and just having a finger on the pulse of what's going on. I am going backwards. Next thing you know, I'm gonna like go into the typewriter production business. But yes, I'm doing traditional publishing and bookstores and all of that. But yes, he's been a huge role model.
And you use this privilege, this position that you have, really, you are using it to change publishing and to hold up authors' voices. And you have held up many voices that otherwise would have been lost. So, how do you think about publishing and what you're trying to do today?
Well, I didn't set out to change the publishing world. As I said, I just wanted a book. Um, but I am not the type of person who hears about things that need fixing and can sit by and let them sort of go on. I mean, when I see a problem, I like to just dive in and try to address it. And as I interviewed authors and got to know the insides of the publishing industry through the author's perspective, and I have never worked in the publishing industry, so it was a unique sort of vantage point to come into it. I kept hearing the same things about the author experience and how disappointing it was and how not valued the authors felt. And I decided, could I perhaps help? Like, what would a new everybody bemoaned the state of the publishing industry. And I was like, well, what would a new type of publishing company look like? Like, could somebody do something about it? This perpetual refrain, who's going to do something? And finally, I was like, well, could I do something? I mean, I know that's crazy. And I spent years researching and trying to figure out if this would make any sense and what was involved in starting a publishing company and how could I make authors feel really, really special? How could I help authors whose books were not being discovered and who were being bypassed by the marketing machine of a lead title at a publishing house and yet had written such a great book? How could I help those authors? I also got to experience this myself because during the pandemic, in addition to starting a book club and ramping up my podcast to 7 days a week and hosting a live Instagram show to help all the authors whose book tours were being canceled, I also started publishing original essays by authors who I thought who had books again, who had books coming out or who needed help or whatever. And I loved working with authors directly. I had Lily King, email me with an attachment in Word, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I cannot believe I am seeing Lily King's original essay for the first time just in my inbox." So I loved it so much, and I then sold an anthology of all those essays to a publisher that came out, and I donated those proceeds to COVID research before we had a vaccine. And I then saw that anthology get shelved, like one copy on a high shelf, and I'm like, no one is ever going to find this book. I can't even find my book. How can anybody else not only find it, but discover it and realize this is what they want? So I started thinking a lot about discovery and how does that work? And how can any book find its audience? And I've been thinking about that ever since.
If you're just joining us, my guest today is Zibby Owens. You're listening to Check This Out on NHPR. I'm your host, Rachel Barenbaum, and we are talking about the publishing industry and how Zibby is working to change it. To be clear, her debut, Blank, was not published by her own publishing company. It's been published by Amazon. So just want to put that out there. What specifically did you see in the publishing industry that was broken?
Yes, and let me just to your last point before people turn off the radio after they heard that, my book was published by Amazon. So my book was published by Little A, which is one of the many imprints under the Amazon publishing umbrella, and when I finally did get a book sold, my editor, Carmen Johnson, took a chance on me, said yes, believed in me, and we've done multiple books together. I am incredibly loyal to her and grateful to her. So I didn't go after Amazon as a publisher, but that's who picked me, and I'm very loyal to people who give me a chance. So that's a whole nother conversation about Amazon and Amazon's impact in the publishing world. And here I am fighting for all the good in publishing and publishing with Amazon, which some people feel is a conflict of interest in a way. But I disagree with that because for various reasons. But anyway, um, back to what's going on with publishing. I felt that it's not fair if authors who toiled for years and tried all these things and finally got their big shot, which I was in the background trying to get myself, then got no support from the people who were supposed to be lifting them up the most. Authors were complaining about, and not complaining, but just bemoaning the fact that they couldn't find an audience for their book, in part because the publishers weren't providing enough support for their release. They weren't sending them on book tours. They weren't selling them to the sales reps who would then sell their books into bookstores. So they hardly had any books in any bookstores. The distribution was really compromised. They didn't help with marketing at all. Were publishers really just printers? Where was the marketing help, the publicity support? They had to do it all themselves or hire an external publicist. Like, this wasn't what they expected. When I go around and talk to aspiring authors or anyone, the first thing I do is try to change what people expect from the industry because it has shifted. So, set your expectations appropriately for traditional publishers. And by the way, this is not the fault of anyone working in publishing. I think the people who work in publishing who I've met are amazing and wonderful. It's just a structural issue left over from what to do with this sort of oversupply of books in the marketplace and how publishers are addressing all of this. So those are some of the things.
Right, so for example, an author like Stephen King, right, gets lots of marketing support, lots of, publicity, lots of attention, and there's very little outlet for debut or emerging authors other than this show, check this out, and now your platform as well, right?
Yeah, there aren't as many tried and true channels for debut and aspiring authors. And if there are, they pick, a handful. And what about the rest of them? And then that doesn't even talk about the self published authors out there. So it's difficult because people have a limited amount of time that they spend reading. There are a limited amount of readers, even though it's a huge number, like that's a fixed set of time. And there are way too many books to be read in that time per person on earth. So what do we do with that? And yet we still keep churning out books, which I still think is great because we want various and diverse viewpoints and perspectives on life in general and literature and all of that. But the main point is you have to be okay with the fact that not every book is going to sell a million copies. And somebody like Stephen King, who gets the marketing support, also brings in the bulk of the revenue for a publishing company and keeps the lights on. So it's a delicate dance.
If you're just joining us, my guest today is Zibby Owens. You're listening to Check This Out on NHPR. I'm your host, Rachel Barenbaum, and we're talking about the debut novel, Blank. Zibby, we've been talking all about the publishing world, and you have written about that in the novel Blank. So we're going to dive into this book. Your main character is Pippa. She's 40-ish, and her world is falling apart. And this book is funny, right? It is very funny. And I was wondering if you could read for us so that we can hear her voice.
Sure. I'll be there in a couple minutes. I just couldn't keep it all in. I bit my lip to stem the flow of tears, but the floodgates opened anyway. I'm trying to get there, I sobbed. But do you really want to know what's going on? My entire life is falling apart. My career is ruined because I decided to publish a blank book, and now it's become a huge mess, and no one will ever take me seriously as an author. Plus, the publisher wants to sleep with me, and I said no, so I'll probably never get another book deal. My car is basically on fire right now. I caused my son's whole class to go into lockdown, as you know. I've apparently ruined my daughter's chances of getting into a good college because I couldn't find her an adequate summer program. I don't know who to trust. I haven't had an orgasm since 3 presidents ago. And not that anyone will ever notice, but my nether regions are going gray. Not even gray, white. White! What am I supposed to do? My life is over.
I love that excerpt. It is so funny, and Pippa is so funny, and this is also such a Zibby voice, right? Just lay it all out there. What was it like writing that, by the way, those paragraphs?
Oh my gosh. I'm, like, mortified. I forgot I even wrote any of that. That's so mortifying. But yes, it's funny just to put yourself in someone else's shoes and say perhaps the extremes of things that you're thinking and feeling, just, like, putting it all out there. That's the great thing about fiction. I wouldn't have put that in a memoir because, that's not me, but it's Pippa's experience, and it's like a blown up, magnified version of the things that you might think and feel. So that's the joy of being able to write fiction.
I have to say that one of the things about your character, Pippa, in the book Blank is that she just lays it out there, like that excerpt that you read, and you do the same in your Substacks, in your emails, not only the publishing industry, but what it's like to be in midlife and what that feels like. So, can you tell me about this 40-ish perspective that Pippa has?
Well, I'm 47 right now. I have 4 kids and I'm in it, right? I've got I'm in the messy middle of it all and it's hard. It's basically impossible to be working mother, wife, sister, friend, daughter, the whole thing. It's like a joke. So I think we have to just laugh and find the humor in some of these untenable situations or else we will drive ourselves crazy. So that's part of what I wanted to do in Blank is shine a light on the craziness of modern motherhood and let us all like just take a minute to laugh about it and to show that you can't have it all together. Why even try?
Yeah. I love that Pippa runs around in her pajamas all the time.
I love being in my pajamas. I know. It's again, fiction. That would be great if I could do that.
Oh, and just to underline how funny this book is, I have to also ask you about the character who decides when he's at summer camp that he gets so nervous, he's worried about being sweaty, so he puts deodorant on his face.
I wish I had made that up, but actually that happened with the boy I slow danced with at summer camp.
God. So how did you find out that he had deodorant on his face?
I asked him at the time, I said, like, "You smell nice," similar to what happened actually in the book, like, "You smell nice, like, what are you wearing cologne or something like that?" And he said, "No, I put deodorant on my face." I was like, "What?"
So one of the things that Pippa wrestles with, and I think writers wrestle with, is that literary success and literary merit could be two different things. Can you talk about that?
That's interesting. So, commercial success, which I think is what literary success means, right? Selling more copies, reaching more readers, higher numbers, and all the ways you can measure higher reviews on Amazon or Goodreads, and all of that number-based success is very different from literary merit, which is the appreciation of your peers in the literary world, the appreciation of readers, the holding up as a model, the beauty of specific sentences, the importance of the work. Those are very different things, and there are very few examples of books that can do both, although it has happened. There is a bifurcation between the two camps and between the two attempts. And it's interesting because in our publishing company, this is one thing that we talk about. We try to find beautiful works that will make a reader think and feel, and people will, just think, wow, that is beautiful writing. But we also want books that have commercial potential. So, I think that the literary world and the reader likes a mix. I think we can't necessarily, or I certainly can't, only read one type. I like to read all types of books. And whether it's, something like a beach read one day and then an award winning book the next or whatever. I love hearing all voices and all styles. And there is a camp that prefers to only read one or the other, two different camps, which is fine. But I think the literary books tend to sell fewer copies, but it almost doesn't matter if they've won some big prize. So the short answer is there are lots of different ways to actually succeed, and it's how you define success, which is another thing I've been thinking about as I go on this giant book tour for Blank. What does success mean to me, and what should it mean for authors? And I just wrote a whole Substack essay about this because I really think that success for an author is being able to have a reader be deeply affected by your book and being face to face with that reader and having a reader say your book changed my life or made me laugh for a couple hours or got me to escape or made me think about things differently. That is a person whose life you have affected deeply, and that to me is success. Being able to have that kind of impact, which I think can often be taken for granted in the pursuit of numbers or prizes or whatever other external accolades there are. The fact that anybody takes time to read a book in this busy world with 8 million distractions and so much selection, the fact that anyone picks your book to read and finishes it is a miracle. And that is success.
So you really point to the differences between literary success and literary merit, and this question of why are we publishing by having Pippa submit a blank document, literally a blank book, and she calls it a think piece. So we can talk about what is the purpose of a book, and each reader could fill in their own. What do we? What am I about? This is my blank canvas. Talk about that as one of your themes.
The the blank book idea came from Pippa's son when she was struggling with what to submit to make her deadline for her second novel, and she thought it was a genius idea even though he didn't mean it seriously, but she thought that was a genius idea because does it even matter what's inside of a book when success is so much based on the marketing of the book and the packaging of the book, and what about the book itself? Because it seems at times that it almost doesn't even matter. I really wanted to highlight that it is the marketing of the book, it is the packaging of the book, it is things like who blurbs what, which authors recommend. All these external things really affect the trajectory of a book's success. And it's not just about one story versus another. There are so many other things that determine a book's success. And Pippa wants to make that clear. And I wanted to make that clear. I wanted to let readers know that how they choose what to read is in part affected by the industry and the behind the scenes maneuverings of a publishing house saying this will be our lead title and this will not. And maybe you end up reading the lead title and not the other one, even though maybe you would have been more interested in the other book. And I just want readers to know when they go into a store and they see mountains of copies of one book and two copies of another, that it doesn't necessarily mean that's the better book. It means that the publisher has put more support into it for whatever reason, sometimes because it is a better book, but not always, and to find the book that's right for them. So I just wanted to pull back the curtain a little bit on some of the many things I've learned since becoming a publisher myself.
If you're just joining us, my guest today is Zibby Owens. You're listening to Check This Out on NHPR. I'm your host, Rachel Barenbaum, and we're talking about the debut novel, Blank. Zibby, so literary success, does it matter what's inside the book? That is what Blank really addresses. It's a little bit of the emperor's new clothes and also some of the author's greatest fears. How important is what I'm writing? Is it going to matter? Is anybody listening? Can you talk a little bit about those fears that you've seen in writers or that you might feel?
Yes. I mean, if you believe that it's even after you get the book deal, that it's essentially luck, it's at the whim and discretion of a publisher, how much support you will get, how likely it is you'll find your audience, all of those things. Is it even worth it? You could back up and think to keep doing this. Why do we do this as authors? Why do we spend years of our lives writing when success is so not guaranteed at all and is in fact akin to winning the lottery essentially. Having one of those big books picked by a book club is so unlikely to happen. And the reason that writers have to keep coming back to is that they love it and that it's important and that it's art and culture and expression and it's a joy to do. It's a miracle to have your thoughts and feelings transcribed on the page and then read by someone else and put into their brain. The whole thing is a miracle. And I think it's really hard to make a career out of writing, unfortunately, which is sad. And it's easier to be a celebrity makeup person, and is there really more inherent value to that? Perhaps not, but this is where we are in the world, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you should stop writing, but I think that writers and authors need to go into the business of producing books and having their work turned into a product with more knowledge and feeling a little bit better equipped to handle what could be disappointment, but when flipped around could actually be great success.
So, speaking of business, there's a great scene in the book where Pippa is talking to her kids, and one of them says, "Oh, mom doesn't really even work. She just sits at the computer and writes." You're laughing already. Talk about that scene.
Yes, I stayed home with my kids for 11 years and wrote some on the side, and when people would ask me what I did, part of me wanted to say, "I'm a non-practicing writer," because all the doctors and lawyers could say, "I'm a non-practicing lawyer right now." What does it mean to be a writer? Is that a job? Is it a hobby, even if it becomes lucrative? What does it mean to set a role model for your kids if what you're trying to do has no immediate output, right? It takes so long to write a book usually, and to get that book out into the world, it can be hard to prove that you're doing anything, especially because part of the writing experience, and I just had Anna Quinlan was my book club pick for her book After Annie this month, and we just did a book club together in my bookstore. And she's like, I was just talking to my friend Ann Patchett about how cooking, walking, and folding laundry, that's when we're working the hardest, but it doesn't look like it. That's when we get all our ideas. That's when we're thinking about the characters. That's when we're actually working. But to be a creative and to work in writing does not look like perhaps working in finance where you have a financial model and you can have a start and a finish and show something. Not that kids really want to see financial models, but yes, it can feel like, is this work or not?
Yeah. And this brings us to Podlusters. It's a book within a book. So Pippa had this great idea. She was writing the novel, and it was essentially stolen from her. And another novelist, writer, came to the idea because she felt the pressure to publish so badly that she actually paid people to bring her ideas. I think that really brought to light the fact that some writers need to publish a book every year, right? So they can pay for their life. This is a business. And
Yes.
to do that, you have to come up with ideas. It's not just this, fancy sit back and sip tea and you have a beautiful moment with your, keyboard. This is a true business. These are people's lives. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes. I said earlier that it's very hard to make writing a living. It can be done, but you have to crank out that level of content, to have a book a year, and then all the associated effort of selling it and marketing it and touring and all of that. It's hard, and it puts a lot of pressure on the author. It can feel like every idea has been taken. It can feel like, why does anybody want to read what I have to write when there's so many other books out there and maybe they're not so different? Is my voice really that different? Is my plot really that different? Why am I doing this? Is it good enough? I mean, one thing a lot of writers have in common is self-doubt and insecurity and anxiety, which has made me feel like I've found my people in this in this world. Even the most accomplished authors who I've interviewed fear that their next book will not hold up. Back to Anna Quinlan, she was saying the same thing because she said, even after you've achieved success, people then start comparing your books to your other books. So you're not even just being compared to other people. You're having people say, well, this wasn't as good as Black and Blue. And she's like, that's hard too. So there's this hope because what it really comes down to is nobody totally understands how it works that your brain makes novels. I mean, it's something that happens. We know we have to sit in a chair and let the magic happen and come through our fingertips, but it's a little bit of a woo-woo thing to write fiction.
If you're just joining us, I'm Rachel Barenbaum. My guest today is Zibby Owens, and we're talking about her debut, Blank. You're listening to Check This Out on New Hampshire Public Radio. Zibby, we're talking about the business of publishing and writing, which is also in the book, Blank. And one of the big things that you write about and deal with in your real world is social media. And Pippa sees the dark side of it. You've seen the dark side of it. Can you talk about social media and publishing?
Social media has become a necessary evil for the author. It can also be a huge joy. I got on social media in 2017 when I started writing again, and right before I started my podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And I was reading a book by Jill Santopolo called The Light We Lost and sobbing at the end, just rivers of tears. And I was sitting in my bed sobbing. And I thought, maybe I should write Jill a note. Like, what if I go on Instagram and like direct message her and just tell her, like, I just had to tell her how much I loved it. And so I did. And I DM'd her in the app. And then she wrote me back. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, she read this and wrote me back. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that readers had this level of access to authors. And that is a joy. But on the flip side, Jill, it's funny to think about what her life was like as she was reading this random note from me as I was, just a reader, because you have to be on call essentially as an author. I think it's rude if you don't respond to messages. You have to document your life and try to build up a following. And yes, Pippa goes through this too. She has a secret account, Open House Bandit, because she loves going to open houses and sort of Ruth Reichling her way through it by wearing costumes and writing reviews of different open houses. But authors have to learn a platform or two. I think a lot of publishers require authors to have a certain number of followers or a big following to help sell books. And again, that skews the content that gets put out into the world. And I take issue with that, but I do think that having some command of social media is important, and being able to have that one-on-one access with fans and readers is essential because everyone else is doing it.
But I do want to take us a little bit into the darker side of social media and trolling and one-star reviews. You are out there as a Jewish author and you have been attacked for that. And I think readers should know that this is happening and how that happens. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about that?
Of course. Yes. When Blank was not even out yet, I went on my Goodreads account to check the ranking, which I don't even know why I did, but you can review books from when they're originally posted. And I realized that someone had posted a one-star review with anti-Semitic comments next to it. And that, of course, pulls down your overall ranking because it's an average of all of the scores. So by putting one-star reviews on your book, you're tanking the ranking, which has an impact. Certain publications won't review a book if your Goodreads score is too low. Readers might not be as interested in the book if it has too low a score. So it's essentially hampering your success potential as an author if you were to artificially deflate the score, and algorithms won't pick you up as well. So it's important, and yet anyone can just go on and ruin it. It's actually amazing that it's that it's allowed to persist in this way. I was upset about this because, oh my gosh, my score, and instead of, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not one to sit back when I think things are unfair. And so I decided to write about it. And I said, a Goodreads troll tanked my ranking. I put it on my Substack, zibbyowens.substack.com, where I write essays every week. And I said, this is so not fair. And so many people agreed with me that a lot of people went on to bolster my score, give me 5-star ratings to offset it. And so many people joined me in reporting the troll to Goodreads that they actually took the ranking down that same day, which is amazing.
That's really lucky, but I think a lot of authors are targeted. We've seen some books, tanked before they even come out because people don't like something that's going to happen. And so they go on to Goodreads and they start giving one-star reviews and they start going on to Instagram accounts or wherever and just writing horrible things to authors. And I keep asking, how is this allowed to persist?
I've been attacked on various platforms for various things over the years. I one time got so many negative Twitter comments in like a cab ride downtown that I got out of the car and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like 10,000 people now hate me." For speaking out in defense of an author. So it happens. It's crazy. And it sometimes has real ramifications in your life and your success. It's crazy.
But on another note, the book Blank is has, this dark side of social media a little bit, but you also have true love. And you talk about true love, you write about true love. Let's talk about that theme for a little while.
I fell in love again at age 40 in a very unlikely relationship with the man who has been my husband now for almost 7 years. And it's not what I thought would happen with my life, but it did and has changed everything. I was literally thinking that this morning as, we were hugging good morning and I was like, gosh, I am so lucky. Like this was not supposed to happen. I can't believe I have this in my life. I had sort of made peace with not having that in that form for a while. So I think true love is such a gift, and I feel so lucky to have been blessed with that I write about it a lot. And I had a moment with my husband Kyle when we were on our first vacation ever together, and it was my first vacation without my kids. And I was at the s'mores pit at a hotel because I love s'mores, and I was just there with all the other kids and their parents. And Kyle had his arm around me or something, and this other mom just looked at me, and she was wrangling her kids, and she was so tired, and she was just like, "What I wouldn't give for that feeling for just 2 minutes." And I was like, "No, you don't understand. Like, I just got this. Like, I am you. I am the you in this whole thing." So, part of why I wanna write about it is to give people hope because it was very unlikely for me at this stage.
If you're just joining us, my guest today is Zibby Owens. You're listening to Check This Out on NHPR. I'm your host, Rachel Barenbaum, and we're talking about the debut novel, Blank. We're going to move a little bit into talking about the power of book clubs. We've talked a little bit about marketing and how we get books out there and how a novel stands out a lot of times is because it's chosen by one of the very few book clubs out there, and they have this outsized power in the industry. Let's talk about book clubs.
Well, I think book clubs are great. I think people long to have a collective experience. There's something about consuming something together that really bonds you. And book clubs do that in a really powerful way. And the big book clubs do that and scale it, which is great. And it makes other people feel close. I think that's why people are drawn to reading from the bestseller list. So they feel like they're doing something that other people are doing and they are connected to others, which is, of course, our most primal need, right? Is to feel this sense of belonging, anti loneliness, and all of that. I think that the few women who have these giant book clubs, like Reese and Oprah and Jenna, I think it's great that they've chosen to uplift books and use their platforms to do that. It's great. And it completely changes the author's lives and enables readers who might not have been discovered to have massive followings. And I think that's amazing. I think it's unlikely to be picked because there are so few picks. I mean, the three of them, one book a month, that's 36 books out of what, a million that come out in a year. And yet everybody feels like, oh, well, this is going to be this. I think Reese is going to like this.
But they have this outsized influence.
Yes, it's the golden ticket. It's the golden ticket, but it's not a lottery. It's not random. It's someone's taste and decision that radically changes people's lives. And yes, it really affects the market. It affects the bestseller list like nothing else. And it's amazing it has evolved into this way.
Yeah, but you're talking about connection and that maybe what these book clubs provide is connection. But I get the feeling that from your publishing house, from Zibby Books, what you are trying to do is create connections as well. And one of the ways that you're doing that is you are actually sending your authors out on tour, which is sort of unheard of, right? Unless you are one of the top front list authors, you are not getting any money at all to tour. But you are different. Talk about that touring.
Well, back to my point of success being in front of a reader and getting that wonderful feeling of talking to someone who's read your book and all of that. Yes, I think there's nothing that feels greater. And we do put our authors out on tour. Connection and community is at the heart of everything that we do at Zibby Media. We don't just have a publishing house. We do reading retreats every quarter with trips to Solvang, California and Asheville, North Carolina, where we take 40 to 60 women and a few authors and have a great weekend of reading and bookstore visiting and yoga and great restaurants and all of that just to bring readers together. We have regular events in different cities and we have our own book club and we do classes. So, yes, connection and community is at the heart of everything. And part of that is touring authors, sending them on our reading retreats, sending them on their own tours to meet people, get out there, connect. I think it's really important that authors meet people. I mean, that's the most powerful way to sell a book is to get to know the author. That's the backbone theory of my entire podcast is if you learn more about the author and you hear about them, and hopefully this is happening with anybody listening to me, you're more likely to buy their book and root for them. And it's again goes back to that personal relationship that you feel like you have when you get to know somebody. So the more we can send our authors in front of actual people or even virtual book clubs or whatever, great. It only helps the book and it only helps the author.
It really amazes me how the big publishers have pulled back on that budget, and they're not devoting like, putting their money into getting authors to connect with readers on that level. It's more like, "We'll try to get you on a few radio shows, podcasts, or a few reviews, but not this one-to-one connection," and I feel like it is such a big part of the industry that's missing now.
It's true. Although I will say I was just going through all the P&Ls of my own company, and it's expensive. I empathize in part with the decisions made by big companies based on numbers. However, I think this is not the right thing to cut. I believe strongly in this. And you could do a local tour. We've had authors do, Northeastern tours, and that's great too. You just have to get out there.
So you have spoken to hundreds. Are you at thousands of authors at this point?
1800.
Oh my god. I am dying to ask you, is there a singular piece of advice or something that recurs in these conversations that you've learned from all of these interviews and authors?
Most authors say a couple things. One, you have to read and read widely. You have to put your butt in the chair and write and just do it. Just sit there, or else you're never going to get it done. And you can't give up. And that the biggest difference between successful authors and not is that the ones who didn't give up reached the finish line.
And what do you think about that advice?
I think that's true. I think sometimes we look around or we read books and think, "Well, I could do that." Right? Or I did. Maybe that's just foolish. I used to, as a reader, I would read books and think, "Well, that's similar to how I write. Like I could write that." Turns out it's not that easy to do the entire book, but I didn't do it. Or the people who wrote the books and had the books come out actually did it. So you can think you can do it. You can think, "Oh, I have a book. I might write a book." And I meet people all the time who are like, "I have this idea." Great. Write the book. Do it, because that's the difference. And it does sound simplistic, but that's what it comes down to. You can have people with far better ideas than your own, but if they're not sitting down and writing the book, it's not getting printed.
What do you want people to take away from your book after they finish reading your debut, blank?
In addition to learning a little bit more about the publishing industry, I really want people to take away that there is always time for your next chapter. And we can always rewrite our own story at any point, even if it's some small decision that sets your life on a different course. You can start making those steps to reclaiming your happiness, and it is never too late for that.
That's such a great message. I think similarly, when I think about Zibby and, what you put out there, although we've been talking about a lot of the downsides in publishing right now and, how it's hard to be an author, I think you also show us a lot of hope, both in your own career and in Pippa, your character, right? That there is hope that at the end of the day, this is about loving books and loving authors.
I agree. I'm sure listeners will agree that there's nothing greater than the feeling of reading the most amazing book ever and just sitting there and like hugging the book to your chest and thinking, wow, that was amazing. And let's just celebrate the people behind that. Authors are rock stars and they deserve to be lauded as such.
So, do you have another book coming with little a?
I do. It's called Overheard, and somehow I'm supposed to finish it by this July, which is looking highly unlikely. To your point earlier about cranking out books, Overheard is about a bookstore owner in Santa Monica. So, a huge stretch since I am a bookstore owner in Santa Monica. And she meets her ex husband's new girlfriend, who it turns out is the biggest movie star around and a local celebrated loved one. And she then goes to her son's football game and talks badly about the movie star to her best friend, and it gets picked up over the football game's live stream and broadcast to the whole community. She is then canceled and has to get back in the good graces of the community with the help of her kids.
I love it. I cannot wait to read it. So the Zibbyverse is huge, it's vast. How do people find it?
You can go to zibbymedia.com and sign up for our mailing list and find out all the great things that we have coming up. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and on Substack at Zibby Owens, where I tell it like it is.
And she does. Zibby Owens, thank you so much for joining us today on Check This Out here on NHPR.
Thank you, Rachel.
You have been listening to Check This Out, a new literary series, which is a partnership between New Hampshire Public Radio and the Howe Library in Hanover, New Hampshire. We dive deeply into the works of emerging and diverse authors you may not have discovered yet. Our producers today are Jared Jenish, Megan Coleman, and NHPR's Jessica Hunt. The Howe Library Director is Ruby Simon. NHPR's Program Director is Emily Quirk. The show is sponsored by the Jack and Dorothy Byrne Foundation and the Howe Library Corporation. I'm Rachel Barenbaum, and we'll be back next week at this same time with more conversations. Remember to go to your local library and check out all the books you hear about here and love.